Hi there, I'm Kelsey. Ever had your own family hand over your life's work? With a forged signature and a smile? Mine did. My parents let my sister rewrite my name right off the company we built, while I was still showing up every morning thinking I belonged. But what broke me wasn't the betrayal, it was how calm they were while doing it. What would you do if your own mother printed your resignation and never looked back? What's the worst betrayal you faced in your family? Have you ever felt erased by the people who were supposed to protect you? And more importantly, what time are you listening to this and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'm reading them all. The morning air in Houston was thick with spring humidity, clinging to the edges of my sleeves as I stepped into the lobby of the company I co-founded 16 years ago. I should have felt pride. Instead, I felt watched. Smiles came too quickly. Eyes darted away a little too fast. "Morning, Kelsey," someone murmured without stopping. The receptionist barely looked up. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe just the Monday blues. But something clanged inside me when the elevator doors slid open on the executive floor. The scent of lilies, dozens of them, hit me first, too sweet and artificial. Gold and white balloons bobbed from corners. A banner stretched across the hallway. New chapter. Bold leadership. No one had told me about a celebration. I pushed open the conference room door and the applause began, without me. Delaney stood at the center, radiant in white. Her voice floated over the crowd like she'd practiced it for weeks. "We're moving forward with clarity and vision," she said, "and I'm honored to accept the role of CEO." There was no mention of me. Not in the slides, not in the speech, not even a polite nod. My chest tightened, but I stood still. My parents were there, front row. My father pretended to fiddle with his phone. My mother clapped, slowly, eyes glassy. Neither looked my way. Someone handed me a glass of champagne. I placed it down without a sip. A few people approached, offered quick hugs, awkward half smiles. One even said, "Change is hard, huh?" Like we were chatting about the weather. And then Melissa from HR appeared with a sealed envelope. "We can talk later if you'd prefer," she said softly. I opened it anyway. A termination letter, effective immediately. By the time I got home, my hands were trembling. I couldn't remember the drive, just the ringing in my ears and the feeling that I had stepped into someone else's life. I paced the kitchen, unseeing. My cat meowed from the counter. I didn't answer. Later, while sifting through the box they'd handed me at the office, I found a flat envelope wedged between a framed photo and a paperweight, no name on it, just taped shut. Inside was a notarized document. I blinked at my signature, then again. My stomach dropped. It was a voting rights reassignment. My shares, my control, transferred to Delaney, signed and sealed, dated 2 years ago. I hadn't signed this. I stared at the strokes of the fake signature. It wasn't even close, but the notary had stamped it, legal, clean, done. I couldn't breathe. Every nerve in my body buzzed, numb and on fire at once. Not only had I been erased, I'd been used as the weapon against myself. I didn't cry. Not yet. I sat in silence, watching dusk smear itself across the windows. I thought of everything I gave up. The wedding I postponed, the holidays I missed, the nights I stayed to clean up chaos someone else created, all so they could take it and smile while doing it. Somewhere between rage and collapse, I whispered, "This isn't over." I went to my desk. Buried behind old tax forms and a broken stapler was a flash drive I hadn't seen in years. I plugged it in. A folder popped up, labeled, "Board Files, Original Charter." My fingers hovered. The screen glowed. And then something shifted in me. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that hums. I sat curled on the couch, a blanket draped over my legs, staring at my phone screen. The gala was everywhere. Photos, applause, headlines. "New leadership, new legacy," one post read. My sister's face smiled from every angle. I clicked on a video of her speech. Her voice was steady, falsely warm. I'd helped draft that script 3 weeks ago. I remembered the phrasing, the pacing, but something pulled at me. I opened the version I'd saved in my Dropbox. My name was gone. Every mention of our founding, the tribute paragraph I wrote about our first hurricane fund, deleted, as if I'd never been part of it. It wasn't a revision, it was a surgical removal. I sat still. Cold crept into my limbs. I pulled out the physical drafts, older ones I'd printed when we rehearsed together. There it was, my name, inked in bold. Kelsey Carter, co-founder and executive director. So she'd planned this. This wasn't about a promotion. It was a rewrite of history, of me. I remembered how Marcus, our head of tech, had flinched when I asked about the program booklet. Delaney made some edits, he'd muttered, eyes fixed on the floor. He knew. I turned to my laptop and pulled up the archives I'd recovered from the flash drive. Halfway down, buried in a folder marked MISC Admin, was a scanned PDF with my old signature. But it wasn't for a contract. It was a document transferring ownership of the Carter Relief Fund to Delaney. I blinked, then read it again. That fund had been my lifeline during the Gulf storms, helping displaced families find shelter, food, and safety. I'd built it out of sleepless nights, grant proposals, and grassroots drives. I never signed it away. And yet, there it was, processed, filed, executed. I felt the same sick lurch I'd had in the conference room, but this time it burned slower, deeper. I searched the company website. The funds page had a new tagline, "Founded and led by Delaney Carter." I laughed. It was sharp, ugly. I scrolled further. She'd used it in her recent interview with a local news outlet. "It's been my passion for years," she said. "Community matters more than credit." Community, sure. Credit, clearly. I stood and paced. The hardwood echoed with each step. I opened the hallway closet, dug into the bin of old files, and pulled out the project binder labeled CRF Phase 1. My handwriting was all over it, margins filled with notes, sleepless coffee rings dotting the cover. I held it like a wound. 16 years ago, we were just two sisters with one desk and no air conditioning. We fought, sure, but we trusted, or at least, I did. I whispered to the empty room, was I too trusting, or just blind? The clock blinked past midnight. I printed the transfer document, then pinned it under the forged signature on my wall. The paper curled slightly at the corners, like it couldn't bear its own weight. I stepped back and looked at what I had. Names, dates, paperwork, not enough to win, but enough to begin. Monday morning hit like a slap. The office buzzed with fresh energy, lattes in hand, tight smiles. I kept my head down, hoping to slip into the conference room unnoticed. But then I heard her voice, my sister's voice, floating from the screen in the lobby. The PR segment played in full. The Emergency Relief Initiative was born from a moment of deep reflection, Delaney said, seated in the studio, her hands folded like she'd just discovered compassion. It was my way of giving back. We needed to pivot, and I stepped in. Not a word, not a whisper of the countless nights I bled for that program. Applause filled the room as employees watched. One turned to another and said, "She's brilliant." I clenched my jaw, tasted copper. The screen flashed with photos of storm victims, the Carter Relief Fund logo beneath Delaney's name. I marched to my office, heart hammering, opened the internal database. I searched the original proposal. Nothing. Then the revised one, backdated, sealed, and approved. My name, gone. The project timeline? Shifted to make it seem like she'd launched it months before I even wrote the first draft. 16 years ago, I had handwritten the first budget in the dark during a hurricane blackout, lit only by a battery-powered lamp. My fingers numb from the cold, scribbling numbers, while Delaney vacationed in Napa. I stared at the screen, heat rising behind my eyes. "Marcus," I called. He poked his head in like a guilty dog. "I need to know who edited the project records," I said. He hesitated. "It went through comms. Delaney had final review." "You approved it?" "I didn't. I had no choice." I didn't argue. I just nodded once and turned back to my screen. Later that afternoon, I was called into the boardroom to present quarterly numbers. I welcomed the distraction. At least numbers wouldn't lie. I walked in, head high. Delaney greeted me with that polished smile she'd perfected for interviews. "You've got this," she said, placing a flash drive in my hand. I should have known. The charts were off. Revenue data jumped between years. A client name was misspelled 3 times. The screen froze mid-slide, and one investor cleared his throat with irritation. I fumbled. "Let me pull up the backup." "No backup?" someone whispered. Delaney sat still, elbows on the table, watching. When I glanced at her, she smirked. A quiet, surgical kind of smile, the kind that knows it's already cut too deep to see the blood yet. One board member leaned toward another. "Maybe she's slipping," he muttered, loud enough. I finished in silence, excused myself before the Q&A. My heels clicked down the hall like gunshots. In the restroom, I locked the stall. The air smelled of lavender and bleach. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I just stared at the wall in front of me, breathing shallowly, hands cold. 3 days ago, Delaney had told me, "It's time you owned the spotlight again." What she meant was, walk into it, alone, and watch it burn. I stepped out, walked to the mirror. My reflection looked unfamiliar, sharp around the edges, hollow in the eyes. I leaned in and whispered to myself, "I won't go down like this." The USB Delaney had handed me still sat on my desk like a curse. I plugged it in again, this time running a diagnostic. It wasn't just a formatting issue. The errors were planted, strategically, maliciously. Every corrupted graph, every misaligned number, they'd been embedded by someone who knew the system's back end. Someone who wanted me humiliated. And I had accepted it from her with a thank you, with trust. I remembered that morning clearly now, the calculated softness in her voice, the overdone cheer in her eyes. But it was the flicker I'd missed then, a twitch at the corner of her mouth, a crack in the mask, the kind that only makes sense in hindsight. I needed someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't going insane. I drove to my mother's house, hands cold on the steering wheel. The lights were on, the porch light casting that familiar glow I used to associate with safety. She met me in the kitchen, folding a dish towel with unnecessary precision. "I ran a diagnostic," I said, voice steady. "The USB Delaney gave me, it was sabotaged." She paused, then gave a tight smile. "I'm sure it was just a mistake. You always did stress too much before board meetings." I stared at her. "You think I'm making this up?" "I think," she said, returning the towel to the drawer, "that maybe you're seeing things you want to see." "No," I said, louder than I meant to. "I'm seeing exactly what's there." She didn't respond. The silence filled the room like fog. "You believe her," I whispered. My mother didn't deny it, just turned and asked if I wanted tea. I left before she could finish the question. Back at the office, I went in after hours to clear my files. At least, that was the plan. HR was waiting. 3 people, neutral faces, one held an envelope. "I'm here to log hours," I said. "There's something we need to discuss," the woman said, handing me the paper. It was a resignation letter. My name, my alleged signature, my role terminated. I stared at the document. "I didn't write this." "It's dated 2 weeks ago," she said. "Effective the night of the gala." My knees buckled slightly. "This isn't my font. I don't use double spacing." "Then maybe we should escalate this," she offered gently. But I already knew. I didn't need a handwriting analyst. I went to my old office, still logged into the admin system. Printer logs, metadata. The document originated from an IP address tied to a residential network, my parents' home. I sat in the dark for a moment, fingers trembling over the keyboard. Then I remembered the night before the gala. My mother had asked to borrow my laptop to print something for Delaney. "It's just some seating charts," she said. "Won't take a second." My resignation had taken exactly 38 seconds to print. I walked out of that building with no badge, no title, no identity in their eyes. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked. The air outside was colder than I expected, the sky still holding on to dusk like it didn't want to let go. They thought it ended with a signature, They had no idea what I'd kept. I waited until well past midnight before slipping into the office. The building was quiet, humming with the same fluorescent chill that had once comforted me. Now it felt foreign. I bypassed the main server and accessed the internal logs from the admin machine I still had credentials for. Fingers steady, breath tight. There it was, clear as daylight. The printer trail pointed straight to my mother's home IP address. The resignation letter had been printed 2 days before the gala. Not an accident, not a misunderstanding. They planned this. They printed it under my name while asking me to pass the salad. 16 years ago, I sat at that same dinner table practicing my first investor pitch while Mom corrected my posture and Delaney offered fake encouragement. Now I see it. The way she set the napkins with surgical precision that night, like she was already laying out a funeral. The next morning, I walked into HR, a folder of printed logs in my hand. I handed it over. The woman skimmed the top page, nodded politely, then said, "I understand this is upsetting, but legal has finalized the file. We can't undo a signed resignation." But it wasn't me. That signature, I stopped myself. What's the point? She gave me the look people reserve for grieving relatives they don't quite believe. Maybe this is a sign to move forward. I left, not defeated, not yet, but gutted in a way that made my spine ache. At dawn, I came back to the building one last time, determined to gather the remnants of my work. My keycard buzzed. Red. Again. Red. The guard at reception, young, confused, asked me to step aside. "I'm here to clear my desk," I said. He clicked through the system. "You're not on file. Sorry, ma'am." Ma'am. As if I were just another outsider. I rode the elevator with shaking hands. My office door had no nameplate. The glass was clean, too clean, like it had never belonged to anyone. Inside, a single cardboard box sat on the floor. My name was scrawled on a sticky note, half peeled, as if they weren't sure I'd show up. I reached for the desk instinctively, then pulled my hand back. It was gone. Not the furniture, the meaning. In the break room, I found the final insult. A cake sat on the counter, mostly eaten, its frosting still perfectly swirled in places untouched. "Good luck, Kelsey," in pastel pink. There had been a party. Without me. I stared at the photo board next to it. Smiling faces, balloons, a group shot. My chair had already been taken. They'd celebrated my exit before I even knew I was leaving. I didn't take the box. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out, letting the elevator doors shut behind me like a curtain falling on a stage I never agreed to perform on. An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Delaney. Hope you're doing okay." I stared at it. That emoji, that smile. Delete. No response, no rage, just clarity. I opened my laptop, not to email, not to plead. I typed into the search bar, "Property records, Harris County." If they wanted to erase me, they'd forgotten one thing, what I'd built outside their shadow. My apartment was littered with coffee mugs, open files, and the kind of silence that has weight. I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, my laptop humming beside me as I dug through an old encrypted drive, one of the last things I had rescued before my office was stripped clean. There, tucked between outdated spreadsheets and logo drafts, was a file name I hadn't seen in years. Founder audio dadfinal.wav. My breath caught. I clicked. Nothing. It was gone. The metadata confirmed what I already feared. It had been deleted last month. The access credentials were my father's. His name stamped beside the final erase command like a signature on my betrayal. He had removed the only direct recording where he called me the vision and bones of the company. He'd chosen her. Again. The screen blurred. I blinked hard. I drove without thinking, headlights carving through the dusk like accusations. My childhood home hadn't changed. Neither had he. When he opened the door, his expression was unreadable, practiced. "You deleted it," I said. He didn't deny it. "That wasn't your legacy to keep." My voice, my words. "This is how legacy works," he cut me off. "You pick the one who finishes the race, not the one who starts it." The The click of the door closing behind me was louder than his justifications. I was done asking for recognition. That night, Marcus called. His voice was shaky, but certain. I found something. It's buried deep in the bylaws, one of the old drafts you forced through in year 2. I sat up. What is it? A clause, Section 12C. Founder rights can't be reallocated or dissolved without your personal signature. My heart slammed into my ribs. I checked. They missed it during the ownership restructuring. It's still valid. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The one thread they hadn't pulled was the one I wove in myself, before they knew how far they'd try to erase me. I'm sending it to your attorney now, Marcus added. But Kelsey, this changes everything. I opened the scanned clause. My initials were there, scribbled like a younger version of me was whispering, I knew this day might come. I sent it off within seconds. Then I booked an emergency legal meeting. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was initiating. They rewrote my legacy, I murmured to myself, but they forgot who wrote the first draft. By dawn, I sat in my car outside the courthouse, the engine off, the cold seeping in through the glass. I left a voice message for my attorney. We're not just defending my stake, we're prosecuting what they stole. A ding lit up my phone screen. New filing. Delaney Carter has petitioned for full founder rights. I stared at it. For once, I didn't flinch. Let her file. Let her walk straight into the clause I buried years ago. I arrived at the courthouse before the sun had fully crested the skyline, heels clicking through the parking lot like a countdown. My suit felt too tight across the shoulders, but I didn't adjust it. The nerves were there, but I'd worn worse armor. Marcus met me inside. His eyes gleamed with restrained adrenaline as he handed me a scanned packet. We found it, in the back of the Baytown storage unit. Locked cabinet, dust thicker than guilt. I flipped through the archive copy, unaltered bylaws, ink faded, but intact. My clause, my name, no red lines, no edits, no Delaney. The courtroom was full, press whispered in the back row. Investors sat stiffly in tailored suits. My parents were seated behind Delaney, flanking her like guards at a throne. Delaney's testimony was smooth, even charming. She painted herself as the savior of the company, and me as emotionally unstable, unable to let go. She was erratic, she said, obsessed with control. Her voice didn't shake once. I didn't flinch. I didn't look at my parents. When my turn came, I stood. I'm not here to defend my emotions, I said. I'm here to correct a lie. I handed the judge the archive document. Marcus confirmed the chain of custody, storage history, and digital verification. The courtroom hushed as the judge read aloud the clause. No structural or voting rights shall be amended, reassigned, or voided without the explicit signature of co-founder Kelsey L. Carter, as recorded in Section 12C. Gasps. One board member muttered something under his breath. Delaney's lawyer blanched. Delaney tried to speak, but her voice cracked. That document wasn't in discovery. Because they had buried it, but I had buried it deeper. What came next moved like thunder. The judge ruled that all recent amendments to the company's ownership were nullified. The transfer of power, invalid. The forged resignation, legally irrelevant. Delaney was found guilty of falsifying legal documents and breaching fiduciary duty. The courtroom didn't erupt. It imploded. Quietly, violently. My mother slumped forward, head in her hands. My father stood and walked out without a word. Delaney stared at the floor like it might break open and swallow her. I was reinstated. Fully. Irrevocably. But no one hugged me. No one cried for joy. The wind was sharp, clean, and utterly cold. Outside reporters crowded the steps. I pushed through them in silence, ignoring the cameras, the microphones, the shouted questions. I didn't owe them anything. Delaney followed 20 minutes later, escorted by security. Her heels tapped against the marble, no longer powerful, just loud. She passed me without meeting my eyes. I watched her go, not with satisfaction, but with finality. I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for the truth, for the name they tried to scrub clean. They took everything. But they forgot one thing. I was the architect, and I always leave a backup. The news broke before dawn. My hotel TV was muted, but I didn't need volume to understand what was unfolding. Giant block letters screamed across the screen. Panic texts leaked. Carter family implosion. Below, screenshots flickered like war photos. Delaney's words, "Call the lawyer, hide the money, she's going to burn us all." I didn't flinch. I just sipped my coffee, watching her empire fall in the same silence she once used to erase me. Public opinion pivoted overnight. Investors pulled out of her ventures like it was a contagion. Talk shows played her meltdown on loop. I stayed in that hotel room, tucked away from the noise, letting the chaos roll over me like distant thunder. Then came the one that landed like a punch. She always needed to be the hero. Let her be alone now. It was buried in the same thread. One message, meant for our mother. Meant to be private. Meant to cut. I stared at the words until they blurred. My chest was tight, but I didn't cry. There was no air left to force tears out, only dust. My phone buzzed. A formal apology from a board member. A job offer with too many zeros. A message from my lawyer asking if I was ready for interviews. I put the phone face down. Later that evening, I drove back to the building I once called mine. The front desk was empty, the lights dimmed to power-saving mode. My name had been wiped from the entrance, the wall plaques, the executive suite. But ghosts don't care about signs. I walked the halls slowly, touching the cool metal of doors, the soft hum of machines still running on someone else's energy. My office was stripped bare, but the fridge in the lounge still held that farewell cake. Frosting wilted, the corner eaten, the message barely legible. "Good luck, Kelsey." They had planned the goodbye before I ever got a chance to say hello to the truth. Outside, the night air was heavy with spring. A chill in the wind made me zip my jacket halfway. That place no longer held me. And it never would again. When I got home, an email waited. Subject line blank. From my mother. We were wrong, but we were also afraid. I didn't open it. I archived it without a second glance. The press clamored for a soundbite, a quote, a victory speech. Instead, I called a small conference and declined the CEO role. "This company taught me how to build," I told them, "but it also taught me how easy it is to destroy the wrong people in silence." Then I announced the Carter Initiative, grants for women ousted from family-run businesses. No microphones crackled in celebration, just a few quiet nods, and one woman in the front row who mouthed, "Thank you," through tears. Weeks later, I passed the courthouse steps again, this time alone by choice. No press, no cameras, just me. Winning had never looked like this. It wasn't a parade, it was a purge, but I knew who I was now, and I knew exactly what I would never tolerate again. A young woman standing outside hesitated before approaching. "Are you Kelsey Carter?" I smiled. "Depends who's asking." She grinned, held up her phone. "Can I get a picture with you?" "Sure," I said, brushing my hair back, "but just one. Then I've got a new world to build." The shutter clicked. My smile didn't fade. I walked away from the ruins they left me in, this time with no need to look back. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence doesn't protect you. It erases you, and when your voice is stolen, you either stay a ghost or fight to become unignorable. I didn't ask for a war with my own family, but I finished it with clarity, not revenge. So ask yourself, what would you do if everything you built was taken in your name without your consent? Maybe you've lived through something similar. Maybe you're still living it. If this story touched your heart or sparked something deep inside you, leave a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't resonate, I still want to hear why. What did you feel? What would you have done differently? And if you believe in stories that reveal hard truths, that lift up the silenced and challenge what's normal, then don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one.